the Washington DC UFO Flap. On the 19th of July 1952, something happened over the capital of the United States that shook the entire nation. Air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport noticed a cluster of strange objects on their radar screens. The objects were flying over some of the most protected airspace in the world. They were directly above the White House, the Capitol building, and the Pentagon. The controllers watched in disbelief as the objects moved in patterns no known aircraft could follow. At the same time, pilots in the air and people on the ground reported seeing bright glowing lights in the sky. The lights darted across the sky at incredible speeds, stopped suddenly, and then changed direction. The military scrambled F-94 fighter jets to intercept the unknown objects. But every time the jets got close, the objects simply accelerated and disappeared. The fighters had no chance of keeping up with whatever was flying over the nation's capital. After a tense night, the objects eventually vanished from radar. But exactly 1 week later, on 26 July, the objects came back. Once again, radar stations across the Washington area picked up multiple unidentified targets. Once again, glowing lights were seen streaking over government buildings. And once again, fighter jets were scrambled but could not catch the objects. The 2 weekends of sightings caused widespread panic across the country. Newspapers ran front-page stories with dramatic headlines about UFOs over the Capitol. Citizens called government offices demanding to know if the country was under attack. The pressure on the government was enormous. The Air Force held its largest press conference since the end of World War II to address the public. Officials told reporters that the radar blips were caused by temperature inversions in the atmosphere. They said layers of warm and cold air could create false images on radar screens. But many radar operators rejected that explanation. They were experienced professionals who knew the difference between real objects and weather effects. The visual sightings from pilots and ground observers could not be explained by temperature inversions either. The Washington DC UFO Flap of 1952 remains one of the most dramatic UFO events in American history. Unidentified objects flew over the heart of the most powerful nation on Earth, and nobody could stop them. The Tehran UFO incident, Iran. On the 19th of September 1976, hundreds of residents in Tehran, Iran looked up and saw a brilliant glowing object hovering in the night sky. The object was intensely bright, flashing with colored lights that could be seen from miles away. Frightened citizens flooded the phone lines at the local airbase with reports of the strange light. The Iranian Air Force decided to send an F-4 Phantom jet to investigate. As the first pilot approached the object, something terrifying happened. All of his instruments suddenly went dead. His communications, his navigation, everything failed at once. The pilot had no choice but to turn around and fly back to base. The moment he turned away from the object, all of his instruments came back to life. A second F-4 was scrambled with orders to get closer to the glowing craft. This pilot managed to get a radar lock on the object and could see it clearly on his screen. The object was enormous and pulsed with brilliant strobing lights of red, green, and blue. Then the craft released a smaller, brightly glowing object from its body. The smaller object shot straight toward the second jet at incredible speed. The pilot thought he was under attack and tried to fire a missile at the approaching light, but when he pressed the trigger, his entire weapons system jammed completely. His communications equipment also went dead, just like the first pilots had. The glowing object chased the jet for several terrifying seconds before breaking off. It turned around and flew back toward the larger craft, merging with it seamlessly. The large object then released another smaller light that shot down toward the ground below. It appeared to land gently in an open area, lighting up the ground with a bright glow. The next morning, investigators went to the area where the smaller object had seemed to land. Residents nearby reported that their electronics had malfunctioned during the night. The entire event was documented in a classified report that was later sent to the United States. American military officials called it one of the best documented UFO cases in their files. The Tehran incident involved trained military pilots, radar confirmation, and electromagnetic interference. 2 fighter jets were rendered helpless by a craft that seemed to control technology itself. The Tehran UFO incident of 1976 remains one of the most compelling military encounters with an unidentified object ever recorded. The New Delhi UFO sightings, India. In October 2004, the skies over New Delhi, India became the scene of a series of mysterious sightings that gripped the entire nation. Residents across the capital city reported seeing strange, glowing triangular craft hovering silently overhead. The objects appeared mostly at night, hanging motionless in the sky before moving away without a sound. The sightings were not limited to just one neighborhood. People from all across the sprawling city of over 14 million reported seeing the same kind of craft. The objects had bright lights at their corners and sometimes glowed with an orange or white hue. Witnesses included police officers, government workers, and ordinary families watching from their rooftops. The sightings continued for several nights, creating a wave of fear and excitement across the city. The Indian Air Force was put on high alert as reports continued to pour in. Fighter jets were scrambled to investigate the mysterious objects in the sky. But the pilots found nothing when they reached the areas where the craft had been reported. Whatever was hovering over the city seemed to vanish before the jets could arrive. Government officials were pressed by the media to explain what was happening. They admitted that unidentified objects had been reported but said they could not identify them. Some officials suggested the sightings might be satellites, planets, or atmospheric phenomena, but witnesses rejected those explanations, saying the objects were too large, too close, and too structured. The Indian media covered the story heavily, running news segments and interviews with witnesses every night. Some television channels brought in scientists and military experts to discuss the sightings. The public demanded answers, but none were forthcoming. Researchers pointed out that India had a long history of UFO sightings that were rarely investigated officially. The 2004 New Delhi sightings brought the topic into the national spotlight like never before. For the first time, the Indian government was forced to publicly acknowledge that something unexplained was in their skies. The sightings eventually stopped as mysteriously as they had begun. No official explanation was ever given for the triangular craft that hovered over the capital. The New Delhi UFO sightings of 2004 remain one of India's most widely witnessed and unexplained aerial events. The Lima UFO incident, Peru. On the 11th of April 1980, a shiny silver sphere appeared in the sky above an Air Force base near the city of Lima, Peru. It was early in the morning, and the object was clearly visible in the bright daylight. The sphere hovered silently near the end of the runway, in plain view of everyone on the base. Military personnel stared at the object, trying to figure out what it was. It did not look like any known aircraft, balloon, or weather device. The base commander saw the object as a potential threat to the airfield. He ordered a pilot named Oscar Santa Maria to take off in his fighter jet and shoot it down. Santa Maria climbed into his jet and flew directly toward the sphere. When he was close enough, he opened fire, sending a burst of 64 rounds straight at the object. He watched his shots hit the target, but nothing happened. The bullets had no effect whatsoever on the silver sphere. There was no explosion, no damage, and no debris falling from the object. It simply absorbed the rounds as if they were nothing. The sphere then rose higher into the air, moving away from the base. Santa Maria chased it, climbing higher and higher in pursuit. He tried to fire again, but each time the object moved just out of range. The sphere seemed to be aware of exactly what the pilot was doing. It would hover and wait, then dart away the moment he got into firing position. Santa Maria chased the object for over 20 minutes, reaching an altitude of nearly 60,000 feet. At that height, he was running low on fuel and had to break off the pursuit. As he turned back toward the base, the sphere simply hovered in place as if watching him leave. Hundreds of military personnel and civilians had watched the entire chase from the ground below. The event was witnessed by so many people that it could not be denied or covered up. Santa Maria later described the object as a smooth, perfect sphere with no seams, no wings, and no engines. He said that in all his years of flying, he had never encountered anything like it. The Peruvian Air Force officially documented the case and could not explain what the object was. The Lima UFO incident of 1980 is one of the few cases where a military pilot fired directly at a UFO in broad daylight. The object took every shot and didn't even flinch.